6th meeting of the Regional Transportation Planning Organization. And with that, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Mr. Thornton if he would lead us in that, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I do see we have a individual with us that hadn't been with us in a while. Ivan, I'm glad to see you back with us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You're going to be here on a regular basis now?
I think so. I had a rotational assignment in the DC Division Office, Deputy Division Administrator for 90 days. And then prior to that, I lost both my parents. So I took a little personal time off. But I think I'm back.
Welcome back.
I appreciate it.
Ms. Firestone, would you certify the quorum, please?
Yes, sir. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Charles City County, Mr. Atkins.
Present.
Mr. Coda. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I am here.
Mr. Holland.
Here.
Mr. Winslow.
Present.
Mr. Miller. Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins.
Here.
Ms. Lascolette. Hanover County, Mr. Davis.
Present.
Chair Peterson.
Here.
Ms. Pritchard. Henrico County, Ms. O'Bannon. Mr. Thornton.
Raison.
Mr. Brannon.
That's French.
Newcastle County, Ms. Page.
Present. That's French.
Mr. Tiller. Mr. Evelyn. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Here.
Ms. Carmack. City of Richmond, Mr. Addison.
Here.
Ms. Jordan. Ms. Lynch. Dr. Newbill.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Ms. Larson. Ms. Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Adams. Ms. Torres.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Totten.
Here.
Mr. Riblett. CTAC, Ms. Erickson. DRPT, Mr. Brule. Mr. Binsky. Mr. Sparks.
Present, I'm online.
So that's another remote participation. We did have a request.
Okay.
Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Rucker.
Here.
FTA, Mr. Koenig. Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale.
Here, online.
Thank you. Ms. Ruffin. Virginia Department of Aviation, Mr. Harrington. That concludes roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum and 3 remote participants.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. First of all, before we go in here, we need to confirm member participation from a remote location. I had got a previous request from Von Tisdale, but Mr. Sparks, you're asking to participate from remotely today. Could you share with us the reason for your request?
Yes, I have a meeting actually in Petersburg here that I need to attend in an hour or so. So
Okay,
sorry I'm not with you in person.
So this is a scheduling conflict then for you?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
first of all right. With that, I have also had a request from Ms. Tisdale for the same reason, a scheduling conflict to participate remotely. After the request, I am finding that both of these meet with our requirements, and I would now entertain a motion to confirm my decision to approve these requests in conformance with the policy for remote participation of members, and the voice of the remotely participating members can be heard by all persons at the primary meeting location, which we have just heard from them.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right. The remote participation is approved for Von Tisdale and Grant Sparks. With that, we'll go on to item number 2, consideration of amendments to the meeting agenda. Are there any amendments to be offered for the agenda? Seeing none, we will go on to the next item, which is the chair's report, which I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time having any words on that. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hodges and let him make the introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we've been selected to present the locality highlights, and Ms. Moranis, our Director of Planning and Economic Development, is here to do that. We'll be glad to answer any questions. Ms. Amos?
Thank you, Mr. Hodges.
I could have talked longer.
I know, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I should have had an agenda, known that I was up. Here we go. Let me get rid of this. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good morning. As Mr. Hodges said, I'm Nora Amos with the town of Ashland, excited to be here with you all. I think we did a presentation to Plan RVA about all the things we're doing in Ashland, but I'm excited to talk about just some specific transportation items, and I understand I have a 5-minute limit. And so I will probably go through them quickly. Happy to answer any questions if you have any following the meeting. And Mr. Hodges is aware of most all of this. I'm sure he's happy to fill you in as well. So again, thank you for having us. The most exciting project I think we're working on is in partnership with GRTC. Back in 2008, so 15 years ago, we worked with DRPT and did a study for a circulator loop in the town of Ashland. We're very excited about transit and would love to get it for our citizens. Most people don't know, but we have a fairly high poverty rate and a significant number of affordable housing. And so a lot of our residents don't have access to transportation regularly, and we need them to employ the employees at our service industries, which I'm sure if you've gotten off at exit 92, you know that we have a good number of. We also have a lovely downtown that we want visitors at our hotels at the interstate to be able to find access to. And so unfortunately, after 2008 and the Great Recession, our plans for that circulator loop kind of got put on the shelf. And we were excited to partner with the TPO and GRTC to do a microtransit plan for the region. And through that planning process, we have been selected as one of the pilot type projects for this microtransit. And so I'm not going to go on all the details. This map is kind of showing our area that will be served. Currently, it's planned to be a free service and on call. So you call and say, I need a ride to work. I need a ride to the caboose, and I'm going to have a couple drinks and then I'm going to get my ride back. And so I think it'll serve all of our residents and employees and employers. We're excited to get that started. The next, again, another partnership in 2015 with Hanover County and financial assistance through the TPO. We did a study of our interchange, exit 92. The preferred option ended up being a diverging diamond, which seems to be becoming more and more popular because it is actually a more affordable option than a clover leaf as well, especially for interchanges that have been developed, such as ours. And so we're at a point now where we're looking to further study this, and we were excited to hear from VDOT that through their STARS program, they will fund the additional studies over the next year and a half. We plan on using about a year, and we plan on using that study next year to apply for Smart Scale funding. We used our CBTA local funds to leverage we get 4 applications for Smart Scale. I know some of the larger localities get more, but 4 is probably enough for the town of Ashland. And out of our 4 applications, 2 of those were approved. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we did leverage our local CBTA money for that application. These applications had been submitted previously and we did not score well. And so I'm really believe that some of that leveraging assisted us in moving up onto the scoring sheet. We're also very excited about our downtown revitalization. If you've been to downtown, you know we did the area along the railroad tracks. Now we're going to move that into what we call the red carpet, the entrance into our downtown England Street. And so we hope to get that started within this fiscal year using some ARPA funds, and we'll be improving the sidewalks, adding additional landscaping, lighting, and most excitedly, in my opinion, is moving the overhead utilities behind the buildings and getting those off of our main street. And so that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully I kept in my 5 minutes. Happy to answer any questions and would love to have you visit Ashland and I can give you a tour of any of these projects.
Thank you. We're thrilled with the micro transit project in partnership with the RTC. That offers a lot of opportunities to complement what we're doing with our downtown, the center of the universe, which I'm sure you're all aware. And we appreciate the support from the region, and particularly the CBTA funds, as Ms. Amos pointed out. Thank you for this opportunity, unless someone has a question.
Mr. Hodges, I can't believe you're such a hard taskmaster. She was scared to talk anymore.
No, she's very efficient.
She
We
is,
appreciate
very much so. I know
And we
she's a
appreciate
treasure for Ashland. But thank you very much, Ms. Ames.
Thank you all for having me.
Ms. Thorne.
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering, do we have place or repository for all of these sister localities? Because that's a good thing to have for those who would like to have that, because, you know, it teaches us more about our sister localities, but it's a good thing to have. So my question to you is, do we keep that? Do we keep copies of those? If we do, well, let me get your answer.
Are we keeping copies of those? Are we taking these presentations and putting them on in our minutes?
If there is a presentation, we do post it with the meeting
Yeah,
minutes.
a good point, and some of it may just be a case of having to come back to view the meeting on it, but when we have something that's shared, we would appreciate that if you would leave that with us. And this is, of course, is just a continuation of what Mr. Lumpkin started last year. I thought it was a wonderful idea to have the highlights for different communities, and so and Ashland being the first one at the beginning of the alphabet, we said, called Mr. Hodges and said, "You're up." And he called Ms. Amos and said, "You're up."
That's how it works.
It is.
Mr. Chairman, is this online as well for other jurisdictions to see and view? Would this be online?
These
This
meetings
presentation,
are
it will be online, so this would be.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're available online.
Yeah.
To come back and see that part of it.
One question regarding the train, I saw a train there in the presentation. Thank you. I was wondering, was there anything new in terms of railroad crossings relative to the Infrastructure Act? Anything new there, Mr. Hodges, that you would care to share?
You've raised a very important point. We managed to get through a presentation without talking about trains.
Trains, yeah.
We don't, there were two projects out there, one related to trains that involved process. We have a overhead bypass of the tracks that's tied to public safety
Okay.
and to education. We were referred to the FRA, and we were not successful in this round, but we feel if we follow a different procedure, we will, and using the leveraging money from the region and from CBTA will help. The other project, it involves working with CSX, and it involves crosswalks, and those are not funded through federal funds. They are funded through CSX through an agreement, and we're having some challenges with that. Part of the challenge is you're dealing with the FRA, and when you're dealing with freight, the state deals with Amtrak. You have to go to the federal level to deal with CSX, and that can be cumbersome. And we've had a good relationship. We've enhanced our downtown, but we're hoping to enhance our crosswalks. And we're having some challenges there. We may ask for the region's support in dealing with that. But thank you for your question. I don't think I answered it in terms of how
Yes, sir,
the
you did.
infrastructure funds are being used
Thank
on
you.
railroads, but it,
Yeah.
it is an indirect support.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions for Ashley? If not, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which opens the public comment period. Is there anyone here who would like to address the TPO this morning from the public? Is there anybody online, Ms. Firestone?
No, sir, we haven't received any requests.
Okay, in that case, we will close up the public comment period. And next thing on the agenda is approval of the May 18th and June 1st minutes. Have we had an opportunity to review the minutes? Are there any changes or additions, deletions that need to be made?
Mr. Chair, I move approval.
Have a motion for approval, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, I will bring this up before we get started, is the election of the fiscal year 24 chair and vice chair. True, we have done this before, but the fact of the matter is my term as a supervisor will end as of December 31st this year. As such, I do not want to leave the TPO in a position of having the leadership change mid-year. As such, we're looking at had a discussion. Right now, Hanover's term is this year. Chesterfield's term is next year, and Mr. Winslow is currently sitting in that position for next year. We're looking at actually reversing the order so that Chesterfield will take on this year's order and Hanover will take on next year's, thereby resulting in some continuity as we go through the year. So for that reason, we will again be looking at another election. I guess technically I'm resigning in that respect. So now we have to elect a new chair and vice chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Hanover fully supports this. We also want to thank Mr. Winslow personally and Chesterfield as a whole for working through this. There are a number of regional bodies that are working through continuity plans. Things are a little bit different this year. Plan RVA has on their agenda a continuity plan instead of election of officers, which will come up next week. But Hanover fully supports this. I think it's not only good for both localities, but good for the region as well. And I think it defines the term continuity. So we fully support Mr. Winslow stepping into that leadership position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Is there a particular method we need to go through this, Mr. Gregory? Or basically, do I need a the nominations, I believe, the recommendation has been that Mr. Winslow would be elected chair and that I would become vice chair for the remainder of this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We have to have have to allow for other nominations. Is that correct?
That's correct as well. What I would suggest, you've made it clear that you are going to resign as chair. So that will be effective immediately, in which case the body will need to conduct another election to elect a new chair and a vice chair.
Okay, so right now I'm looking for, I guess, the official nomination.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis?
Mr. Chairman, I move that Mr. Christopher Winslow from Chesterfield County be placed in nomination for election as chair of the TPO, and Mr. Canova Peterson from Hanover County be placed in nomination for vice chair of the TPO.
I'd like to second that nomination.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, we will close the nominations. And we have a motion and a second on the nominations as presented. Unless is there further discussion?
Question. Should we accept your resignation first?
Let him get through the
Is that, should that?
I don't believe that's necessary.
I
But if the body would like to do that,
If they
certainly
would,
certainly
okay.
can. I
Thank
think
you,
Mr.
Mr.
Carroll has a
Ms.
question.
Carroll.
I think a friendly amendment to that would actually be for that nomination to take place as soon as your resignation is official. And the reason for that is, right now you're presiding over the body as the chair, so you could not have.
I won't be in about 2 minutes.
Right, and so you can't actually, if you already resigned, you couldn't be doing that in your position. So you're not technically resigned yet, which means you have the opportunity to preside over the body.
Mr. Chairman,
And finish this.
I amend my motion to accept your resignation post-election nominations of Mr. Winslow as chair, and Mr. Peterson as vice chair. And I'd ask Dr. Newbill if she would kindly accept a second recommendation on it.
Absolutely, Mr. Davis.
Okay, with that, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor, do we need a roll call vote on this?
Yes, sir,
We
please.
do need a roll call vote on this. Ms. Firestone.
Okay, Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Atkins?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
A resounding yes.
Mr. Holly?
Aye.
Mr. Winslow?
Aye.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Chair Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Thornton?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Addison?
Aye.
Dr. Newbill?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Mr. Totten?
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you. Now I officially resign. The gavel is yours, sir.
Well, Canova carried all the water here, so the rest of the agenda should be relatively light. I do want to just take a moment and.
I literally am carrying all the way.
Thank you. I do want to thank Canova for his leadership on this committee and his work on this committee over the years and for his public service. And I ask that we stand and give him a round of applause.
Chairman,
Yes, please, Mr.
I think this sets some kind of record, for this body in terms of length of service.
Yeah.
How long have you served, as chairman this time? How many minutes? Yeah, I'm thinking about the plaque we have, with all the chairmen. Does he get noted as
Yes,
being
I've
chairman?
done it once before, so I've got that.
So are we gonna say 1 month or 20 minutes? Thank you, Canova.
Yeah, outstanding, sir, outstanding.
All right.
Chair.
Yeah, please, Ms. Newman.
I simply would like to thank Mr. Peterson for his thoughtfulness as well as yourself, Roland, to the continuity and transition in leadership in this body. This was important from my perspective and very thoughtful. Just really appreciate it.
Very much. Absolutely. Second.
We will proceed to the consent agenda, Mr. Parsons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, item 7 is the next one on the agenda, and this is shown on page 18 of your agenda packets. What we would like to do is have action by the board to revise the FY24 meeting schedule. And the change would be to strike the October meeting. So we would respect the time that all of the board members are putting into a busy fall and schedule these policy board meetings around that. So we would, if the board approves it, we would have action that there would not be an August meeting or an October meeting. Mr. Chair, this is a request for a voice vote.
All right. Any discussion on the request? Any motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The consent agenda, just a brief overview of the two items. The first is the work status and financial reports, starting on page 20 of the agenda packet. Overall, the year ended smoothly. We did have a little bit of carryover in both our PL and 5303 funding, and have taken the necessary steps to reflect that carryover in our FY24 budgets. So we work closely with VDOT and DRPT to make sure that those funds are continuing to be available as needed, so that we can continue the important work of the TPO. The next item, item 8B, is a VDOT requested tip amendment, and that is on page 40 of your agenda packet. This is for an amendment to the Richmond-Henrico Turnpike South segment in Henrico County. This project is a smart scale selection and has been reviewed by the TAC and unanimously recommended for approval, and there was a 15-day public review between June 15th and June 30th. Staff recommends approval of this as requested.
All right. Motion for approval.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
Second, any discussion on the tip amendment here? Hearing none. Voice vote, or is this?
Voice vote.
Voice vote. Very good. All in favor? Any opposed? Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under new business, item B1 is the presentation by Mr. Ariel regarding the socioeconomic data set, and we're expecting action requested to approve the SU data as presented.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Sulabh Ariel, transportation planner here at the TPO, and I'll be presenting and asking your approval of the socioeconomic data for the 2050 future year, which is the key to the next long-range transportation planning process. So the socioeconomic data provides estimates and projections of population, employment, and other socioeconomic data for the Richmond region within small geographic areas called the transportation analysis zones, as well as the jurisdiction level, as well as regional levels. So if you are familiar with census geography, a TAZ would be comparable to census block groups, but the definition is different. Census block group normally has a population of 600 to 3,000, whereas TAZ is more inclined towards traffic generation and attraction. So even if there is no population, but there is employment in that particular area, it could still be a TAZ. So our Richmond region has 875 TAZs in total. The socioeconomic data is the major input for the Richmond region's regional travel demand model, the RTC model, Richmond Tri-Cities model, because it covers area of both Richmond as well as Tri-Cities MPO.
I have one question for you.
Yes,
on
sir.
that. Is this based on the zoning of land, or what is actually on the ground when you do these model now?
Actually on the ground.
On the ground, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So the RTC model, the Richmond Tri-City model, is a major analytical tool which has been used in the development of long-range transportation planning process, especially the last long-range transportation planning process, Connect RVA 2045. The model was heavily used for project evaluation and prioritization, as well as evaluation of the whole plan. The scenario planning process, the Pathways to the Future, which is the first scenario planning process for the Richmond region, will also use the travel demand model as one of the major analytical tool, as well as the underlying data, the socioeconomic data, which goes into that model for evaluation. The socioeconomic data is developed by Plan RVA staff in conjunction with the socioeconomic work group, which is established by a TAG. We can say that it's a subgroup of the TAG, and it includes the members from all the 9 localities of our region, as well as members from VDOT, both central office, as well as VDOT Richmond District, DRPT, GRTC, as well as Tri-Cities MPO. So the basic methodology which we used to develop the 2050 horizon year data was, it was based on 2017 data. The 2017 data was approved by the RRTPO policy board in 2019. And at that time, the future year was 2045. This time we are updating the future year to 2050. There were thoughts about updating the base year as well to maybe 2020 or 2021. But due to COVID implications, we couldn't update the base year. 2022 would have been a reliable year, but we need data to develop the base year. And normally there's a lag of a few years to get the actual data. So we stick to 2017 and just updated the 2045 to 2050 and ignoring any COVID implications.
Chair.
Please, Ms. Carroll.
And I'm not trying to be too critical here, but my concern is that those numbers based on 2017 are not even close to where we're at in the region now. We know that from the most recent information from Weldon Cooper that the Richmond region is growing at an exponential rate compared to anywhere else in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I question how we can be accurate in this, knowing, just as an example, that 21 people a day are moving into Chesterfield County, especially in the western part. So not trying to be critical, but I don't know how accurate your numbers are going to be if you're basing them on something that we've seen a huge change since COVID.
Yeah.
Of people actually fleeing other parts of the state and other parts of the country, for that matter, to come to the Richmond region.
So even the base year is 2017. We used 2020 census, which came out. And Weldon Cooper projections is one of the major tools which we have used, which I'll talk about in a few slides.
Okay, good.
So,
Mr. Chairman, following up on your question, when you asked whether or not it was based on the ground. When we look at these transportation analysis zones, and I think his question was related to, are you looking at things like the future land use map of the localities? Okay, if you take the two broad stovepipes, you have commercial and residential. If you're just doing some type of trend analysis and you're not looking at the future land use map, calling for different types of development with different types of growth and trip generation from a transportation standpoint, how well do we just go back and do some type of percent trend analysis to project going forward?
So this is not totally based on trend analysis. So we looked at the future comprehensive plans, land use plans from all the localities. We also looked at the current comprehensive plans like Henrico Next, as well as Envision Hanover, which hasn't been adopted. So it's based on what the localities think would have a significant growth in the future. So it aligns with the comprehensive plan. Things like, let's say, the green city development in Henrico County, which wasn't there in the previous round of socioeconomic data, it's there. Similarly, the Powhite Extension Corridor in Chesterfield, the employment out there was 87 in 2045. That's what we projected. Now it's more than 10,000. So we have considered the actual grounded data which the localities have for these projections as well. And it has been vetted by the localities as well.
Okay, so just to summarize, you are doing more than just looking at what's on the ground today.
Yeah.
And using some type of trend analysis to project forward. You are including these other components in your analysis for projecting forward.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk about that in detail.
Okay.
So the basic approach was to develop a jurisdictional control total first, and then distribute the population and the employment to the TAZs based on that control total. And it was distributed on the current TENS, as well as looking at the locality comprehensive plans and growth as well. So population and employment were two major independent projections. Other attributes were directly dependent on population. So for population, we looked at the 2050 Weldon Cooper numbers, which is the state's official projections. So they projected everybody to 2050. We looked at that 2050 projections from Weldon Cooper. So based on state code, we can alter the Weldon Cooper projection by plus or minus 10%. So we can go beyond below Weldon-Cooper projection, or we can go above Weldon-Cooper projections. And if we want to go more than 10%, then we have to provide proper documentation. So that goes into the next slide, in which we can see that there's a column which says the Weldon-Cooper difference. So you can see that most localities went with the Weldon-Cooper numbers. Charles City County, which the Weldon-Cooper has actually said would decline, went with 10% more than what Weldon-Cooper was, and Hanover went with 1.46% more, which aligns with the Envision Henrico comprehensive plan, which is being updated, as well as the city went more like 3% more than what the Weldon-Cooper is projecting. So overall, the reason differed from Weldon-Cooper projection less than 1%. So if you look at the total growth rate in the region, it's 34% from 2017 to 2050. That's I would say the significant growth comparing to Hampton Roads region, Tidewater region, it's just 17%. So we are growing like 32%. And if you look at the annual growth rate, it's more than 1%, but I would say that the growth is not compounded. It's a simple growth rate here. For employment, there is no official state projections. So what we did was we had ground data from VEC, Virginia Employment Commission, for 2008, which is the year before the Great Recession, 2012, which is the year after the Great Recession, and the latest 2017. We didn't consider any employment after that because, as we all know, during COVID time, the employment decreased. And we didn't want to keep that trend for the future, right? It's normally assumed that in any projection, the economic recessions and booms basically subtract out. So we don't consider that. But obviously, COVID is a very special case, and nobody knows what's going to be for a long-term application for COVID. But this time, we just ignored COVID implications and didn't look at the employment data for 2020 and 2021. But we know that it decreased from what it was in 2017. So based on these three numbers, as well as looking at the national, local, and regional trends, we worked with Sumara Economics, which is a Richmond-based economic analytics firm, which is nationally recognized. Based on our data and their model, we project the employment for 2050. And that was the baseline projection. Then we also allowed any major growth, the major growth which we are defining here is anything which would provide more than 1,000 jobs in the region. So we had that baseline data from Sumara Economics, which staff in Sumara Economics developed. And then we had a few projects in the Richmond region, Project Rocky in Goochland, CoStar in Richmond, as well as Legos in Chesterfield. So those added employment was added on top of the baseline data. And then we provided that information to the localities, and everybody agreed on that. So if you look at the employment growth, again, it's 30% growth over the period of 27 years, which is, it accounts for almost 0.91% annually. But again, this is not compounded. It's simple growth rate.
Seems like one interesting asterisk might be the fact that since COVID, obviously we can't talk about COVID, but since COVID, we have so many people working from home. And how are those jobs allocated? You know, is the big office in Pittsburgh of a company that, that has all these people working at their kitchen tables, like my wife for the last 3 years, is that a Pittsburgh job? Or is that a Chesterfield job? Yeah. And it's just, I just throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a very important question which people in our community, the travel demand model, have been thinking throughout the nation. So it's going to be difficult, but we have to assume that out of, let's say, we have to give certain percentage of employee saying that they work remote. Because after all, we are looking for employment for the commute, which they commute. If they are not doing that, then it doesn't matter. So we have to use that percentage. Somehow we have to establish saying that, okay, we have, let's say, 10% remote workers, and things gets difficult when we have hybrid schedules. So people are working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or a different schedule, and they're not traveling 2 days. It's going to make more difficult things. We have looked at what we call as the headquarters problem, which is also there in VEC data. So let's say the state government is in Richmond. I'll give a very good example, ABCs. So as we all know, we have like maybe 25 ABCs throughout the region, but based on the VEC data, everybody is located in Main Street. That's not the case. So we disaggregated that data as much possible, but still, I wouldn't say it's perfect. So we developed 2 documents as it was there in the agenda packet as well. So one is the executive summary, which only includes the summary of the 2017 as well as 2050 data, as well as the methodology which we used. The other one is the full report, and it contains everything which is in the executive summary, as well as all the TAZ level data, as well as the maps, so that you can refer to it.
Mr. Chairman, so I see in the population forecast, I calculate a 34.2% increase in the population, which is pretty significant, which would have ramifications for housing and certainly transportation and moving people to and fro.
Right.
So it will be a significant opportunity if we can get more people out of cars and into alternative transportation. It will be very good.
Right.
But thank you.
So for the first time, we have included GIS hub. So this static document, it's difficult to say which area it is. We have the TAZ numbers, but you have to locate them in map. So what we did is we developed a socioeconomic geo hub, and we'll share the information about this. I don't know if this is being shared or not. It's not being shared. Let me see if the link works. Okay. So somehow it's not sharing. I don't know. We stop sharing and then share again. Okay, so this is the socioeconomic GeoHub, which includes all the documents as well as story maps and dashboard. So you can click on this map and you can see the draft document there. Once you approve this data, the draft would be removed. You can go to all pages, or you can, if you want, you can download the data as well in a PDF format. And you can see those 4 small boxes here. If you click on that, it returns back to the main page. I'll show you a few things about the story map. So we have this story map here. If you scroll down, it has some text, it has the summary table, and then the best thing is that you can explore the data. So if you can zoom in this data, and then if you click on, I apologize, I think the internet probably is slow up here, so it's not, okay, maybe that's slow. So let's choose a TAZ. So if we just click a TAZ here, second time. The gist is that if you click one of the TAZs here, it'll show you all the data. So it's easier than looking at the document. Similarly, we have a dashboard which gives you the population as well as employment for the region, the percent change, the numerical change. So if you just click on one of the TAZs or any group of TAZs, you can actually see what is the change. And again, I think the internet is slow, so it's acting up. But if you go there and select, these would change based on what TAZ or group of TAZs you selected.
That's great.
So seems like I have to stop sharing again and then share again. Get that slides back.
Mr. Chair, we can provide that link to the
Please do.
policy board members as well as the committees. Please do.
Okay, so sorry for the hiccup. So this is the final summary of 2050 future year data, which I'm going to ask you for your approval. So the 2050 data basically includes population, obviously total population, and then it breaks down the population in households as well as in population in group quarters, which includes both institutionalized as well as non-institutionalized population. Then it has the housing data, which includes the housing units, which is the total housing units, as well as household, which are the occupied housing units, any vacant units not included there. So I think we have a good vacancy rate. I think I haven't calculated it, but it seems around 5-6%, which is a healthy vacancy rate because people would have housing choices. If it's 100% full, then people don't have any housing choices. We also look at the autos. It's basically looking at autos, 2XL autos used for personal use, basically for commutes. And this data was basically for 2017, we actually got the DMV data, the registration data, and developed that. And this is based on similar lines, looking at the average auto ownership per TAZ. Then we also looked at the K-12 enrollment, which includes both private as well as public schools. The colleges, again, we look at private proprietary as well as public colleges. And then finally, we have employment, which we have total employment, and it's broken down into retail and non-retail. Actually, we have broken down employment into sectors, 20 next categories, which is not shown here, which is required for modeling purposes. But for here, we just have a breakdown of retail and non-retail. So before I ask you for your approval, I just want to echo what's there in the slide, that predicting the future is not easy. But for this project, we have used the best data resources which is available and which can be used, as well as the best minds in the region, both from the localities, state agencies, as well as Plan RBA staff who know best about these projections.
All right, are there questions or is there a motion?
And then finally, I just want, your data approval. This data was approved by the socioeconomic data work group. Again, TAC also recommended it. Staff also concurs with the TAC. So basically, we have two resolutions that the TPO board approves the 2050 data at the traffic analysis zones, at the jurisdictional level, as well as regional level, as presented by RRTPO staff. And the second part is that RRTPO policy board authorizes the staff to use this 2050 future year socioeconomic data in the RTC model update process, because once this is updated, it's going to be used by all the transportation studies which has been taking place in the region. So they can use this latest data for any traffic projections in the future.
One question, Mr. Ariel. So what is the next one of these that will occur after this one?
So the next one would be, we are thinking about 2025 as the base year.
Okay.
And then probably 2050 or 2025, 55 or 2060 at the next future year.
So,
and it'll be for the next, not this round of LRTP, but the next round of LRTP.
So in 2 years, we'll then have that post-COVID baseline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Ariel? Please, Mr. Carroll.
Just in looking at the numbers that are in here, and I understand we're using 2017 numbers, but they're not even close to current numbers. And what I would ask is if and I don't know how hard it would be to update the model, but if we're gonna use this to project for traffic studies that are gonna be conducted in Chesterfield County in the future for future development projects or even anything else, we need to have more accurate numbers. Because this is not, it's not where it's at. I mean, I'm looking at what the projections are, what I already know in my district, this is off. Not to mention the amount of vehicles that they listed there for Chesterfield County in 2017. We know we have over 400,000 vehicles now in Chesterfield County. So I'm not comfortable with the numbers personally. If this is gonna be the tool everybody's gonna use, it needs to be more accurate than that.
Well, yeah, and so I guess one of the questions there fundamentally is, what is this going to be used for? Is it going to be used, for instance, for analyzing applications for funding requests from localities. Is that what some of this is, or is this just really just a study to kind of give us an idea of how we're planning?
So in parts, it would be both. It's going to be used to evaluate the project for the next long-range transportation plan. But I would say that even if you see the 2017 data, the 2050 captures everything. And we are not looking at the 2017 data to evaluate anything. It's just there as a base year. What we are looking at is 2050 data to evaluate anything. So everything is captured as per now, even for Chesterfield County. It has been vetted by Chesterfield County staff as well as other county staff. We looked at all different things which are coming up, where growth is happening, and it's a major change from what it is in 2017. The only thing which we didn't do was update the base year because of COVID implications and the restrictions on the data. Since this project had to be finalized now, we couldn't wait for further. It would have been good to use 2022, but we couldn't start that project unless, I would say, early 2024, because the data is not available. There's a lag of data. But I would again say that it captures everything in the future, even though the base year remains the same.
Questions?
Sure. Barbara, can we get a yes or no from you back there? Are you good?
Yeah, Logan Ashby with Budget Management was on the socioeconomic team and reviewed the data. So we're confident with it.
Very good.
When we do project-specific studies, we get counts at that location, existing counts, and we look at the development that may occur and make projections off of that. So it's zoomed in more for an actual location.
Good. Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, I would add, this would just be the baseline because this is for the whole region. But if you look at specific projects, let's say the Powhite extension, they would sometimes even make smaller TAGs because that would make more sense, and then alter the projection. So while I was the part of the Powhite extension study as well. So we didn't have 2050 data at that time. We had 2045 data, and it didn't had anything in the Powhite. As I was saying, one TAG just had 87 population projected for 2045. And then we came up with 10,000. So sometimes when we do those finer studies, we change this. This is just the baseline, so.
Any other questions?
Just-
Please, Mr. Williams.
Just a statement to see if I can summarize. So what you're saying is we shouldn't be looking just at the 2017 and being concerned about that, because by the time we get to 2050, you've mitigated any deficiencies that's in 2017 with additional data and analysis.
Yep.
Okay.
If we're gonna use 2050 numbers when we look at these analysis, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and then we update this every 4 years, so it's not that this is gonna stay for 10 years. So again, we are going to look at the base year and even Weldon Cooper numbers. So if you remember last time when Weldon Cooper projected for Chesterfield, they projected only 450,000 for 2045. And now, after 2 years, they recalculated the projections, and Chesterfield is around 5, I forgot the exact number, 500, more than 500. Yeah, so it happens all the time. That's why we do a constant update of these processes.
Yeah, and that's my point, Mr. Chairman, if I may. One point I want to look at is when you're ever looking at that time of a horizon, you want to look at maybe on 5 to 10 year intervals you mentioned that you're going to do, which means if there's a need for adjustment, you can make the adjustment. And secondarily, one question, what's the implications federally and at the federal level relative to this data? Does this help us, hurt us in any way?
So the federal code doesn't say anything about it.
Okay.
It doesn't even say that the region needs a travel demand model because they have to look nationwide. Some places are small MPOs, they don't have staff to develop this because this is a very data extensive, highly difficult process. It took almost a year to develop this data with the localities as well as Plan RVA staff, and to use the model, it's again difficult. I would say that Richmond might be the only MPO who has staff capacity to use the model. Otherwise, most it's done at VDOT Central District. No other MPOs, maybe Hampton Roads does it a little bit, but we don't have that stuff. So federal code is silent about that, they don't say anything. But the model to work, the base year cannot be older than 10 years. So we have the base year 2017. This is going to be valid till 2027. And then by that time, we'll have a new base year 2025. Mr. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the SC data as presented.
Second. All right, we have a motion to second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mott. We have the West Broad Street DRT corridor analysis. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you go to tracks, right? Tracks.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Dan Mata. I'm a transportation planner here at Plan RBA, and I was the project manager for this particular analysis. So today I will just be talking a little bit about the West Broad Street BRT corridor analysis, giving you a brief overview and asking for requested action. This analysis was a partnership with GRTC, and it also involved some regional partners, Henrico County, DRPT, VDOT, and others. So today I'll just give you a quick project introduction, go over some very brief public survey results, give some details of the analysis itself, go over the recommendations from the analysis, and then go over some next steps, and then get into the requested action. So this project involved looking at a possible extension of the current Pulse BRT system beyond its current terminus at Willow Lawn. It involves, this is the initial kind of preliminary analysis. The next phase of this would happen as early as next summer, 2024. This particular analysis involved public outreach, an analysis of the transit propensity or transit friendliness of the area, involved a pretty detailed economic impact analysis, and looked at some segment options and recommended segment options for an extension, and then, of course, culminated in the final report. So this is the study area that we looked at. It's Broad Street from Willow Lawn to just east of 288 near West Broad Marketplace. It's about just under 10.5 miles in length. We looked at particularly the corridor itself, West Broad Street, but we expanded half a mile from West Broad itself to include that as a study area. So the corridor itself is entirely within Henrico County, but with that half-mile buffer, it does extend into the city of Richmond and Goochland County as well. This is, as everybody here knows, a very heavily trafficked area with a lot of residences, shopping centers, places of employment, a lot of community assets in this area. So we started this analysis with a public survey at the end of last year. It was open from mid-November to mid-December. We did collect just under 1,400 responses, so we were happy with those results. And the goal of the survey itself was to just better understand the travel priorities from the public, look at travel behavior, and examine some barriers to travel that people are experiencing. We collected over 31,000 data points, so a lot of information was collected here, including over 1,000 open-ended comments. All of this, I'm just going to kind of give a very brief overview of the survey, but all of the information about the survey, as well as more information about the project, is available at a website that we set up, westbroadbrt.com. So to just briefly go over the survey, we started out asking just the public what their general feeling was about this corridor and asking to rank these priorities that are listed here. So ranking public transit service, corridor safety, pedestrian accessibility, bicycle accessibility, reducing traffic congestion, maintaining property access, and parking near transit. So just ranking how important these issues are to the general public. And public transit service was chosen as the top priority, followed by pedestrian accessibility, and then closely followed by reducing traffic congestion. We also asked what form of transportation people currently use. So people who answered this question in the survey indicated that personal vehicle is the form of transportation they use the most at 75%, followed by walking at 37%, and then public transit just behind that at 36%. We then asked what form of transportation people would use if it was more available to them. And with this, we kind of saw a flip with the personal vehicle and public transit categories. Personal vehicle fell by about 50 points, and public transit increased to 72%. And we also saw an increase in walking and biking as preferred modes of transportation. I also want to just highlight the carpool ride sharing area. Oh, I'm sorry, the taxi, Uber, Lyft. So the ride sharing area in the middle there did decrease from 23% to 6%. So that might indicate just an over-reliance on these services because of a lack of reliable public transit in this area currently. The last point from the survey I'll mention is we did ask if a lack of reliable transportation has prevented people from finding a job or keeping a job. 22% indicated that lacking reliable transportation has prevented them from finding or keeping a job in the past. And just over 6% say that lack of reliable transportation prevents them from working now. So that 6.2% equates to 86 individuals. So that is, of course, 86 individuals in this region that can't fully participate in society and access opportunity.
Can I ask a question?
Please, ma'am.
When you talk about the public data here and the questions which are extremely pertinent that you ask, how do you reach what some people call the underserved population? How do you know you get their feelings involved in how they want to get from place A to B?
For this particular survey, we did try to focus on reaching transit riders. So we went to, we posted surveys at 47 transit stops and pull stations, particularly around this area that we're studying. So we tried to reach current transit riders, which are predominantly underserved communities. I hope that gets to your question.
In other words, this survey was done particularly in this particular area. We are extending the lines over.
Yeah. And just to my last point, I think this quote kind of sums up what we're getting to here, is that our transportation status quo, unfortunately, is worsening social mobility, and a long commute is one of the biggest barriers to escaping poverty. So again, this is about accessing opportunity, advancing in society, and overall just strengthening our communities. Now we'll get into the analysis itself, which we kind of started in earnest after we heard from the public in the survey. So the analysis started with a look at transit propensity or transit friendliness in the area, and we examined different factors to determine this friendliness, such as the current transit that exists in the area right now, equity factors. So we looked at equity emphasis areas that are outlined in Connect RBA 2045, our regional transportation, long-range transportation plan. We looked at low vehicle ownership areas, high transit use areas, walkability of the area, activity centers along the corridor. We did a parking lot analysis to look at where parking lots are and how they're being used, and just overall the development of the area and pipeline projects that are in and around this corridor. We also tried to understand the transit propensity by looking at what we devised as these BRT benefit areas. So areas that as they exist right now might have high, moderate, or minimal benefits for extending rapid transit to these areas. So we looked at equity, the equity emphasis areas that I mentioned earlier, low vehicle ownership, high transit use, activity centers, worker population, and transit supportive employment. So essentially, if one of these factors was present in one of these census tracts that are shown on the screen, it got a point, and then it was weighted, as you see on the screen here. With this methodology, we found that probably unsurprising, the east end of this corridor closest to downtown Richmond currently has a little bit more readiness for expanded transit, so a little bit high BRT benefit areas, mostly north of Broad Street, east of Parham Road. Also a little bit in the west around Short Pump, but strongly in the eastern edge. And the two highest scoring census tracts that we found were in that north section of Broad Street east of Parham Road, and the lowest scoring is in the western end, in the northwest corner of 64 and 295. We also looked at crashes as part of this right-of-way analysis. There were over 5,000 crashes in this study area, not just on the corridor, but within the study area from 2018 to 2022. And this includes 16 fatal crashes and over 100 severe injury and over 1,100 with visible injuries. And we found crash clusters around Willow Lawn, Glenside, Westland Shopping Center, and Gaskins, amongst other smaller cluster areas. This is the fatal crash clusters that you see on the screen, but we also found severe crash clusters that were more spread out along the corridor. And these areas that we found these clusters in kind of do, it supports what we heard from survey respondents about their perception of safety along this corridor, particularly in connection to speeding and aggressive driving along Broad Street. So as part of the analysis, we found these challenges and opportunities. I just put them together here on the slide. So the challenges and opportunities that we found primarily are improving essential bus stop infrastructure, so benches, shelters, even trash cans are definitely needed along this area, this corridor. Completing the sidewalk network, it's kind of hit or miss where there are sidewalks along this corridor, but it's largely an unconnected network. More sidewalks in the western edge along Broad Street, or along Short Pump and Short Pump area. Ensuring that all bus stops comply with ADA standards is definitely a challenge, but also an opportunity. Currently, there's only a small handful that comply to ADA standards. Better integrating the surrounding bicycle network. I know that this is something that Henrico County is focusing on, and they're doing a good job of expanding bicycle and pedestrian accessibility, but right now it doesn't quite reach Broad Street. It's more on the periphery. So just kind of tying in those networks together so we get that first mile, last mile connectivity so people can safely get to bus stops to get where they're going. Adding pedestrian scale lighting, there currently is no street lighting on this section of Broad Street, with the exception of some in the very eastern edge in Richmond. And then there's obviously street lights, or there's lighting in private developments and shopping centers, but they don't quite reach sidewalks or where people are walking or rolling. And making sustained efforts to promoting transit, particularly among people who do take transit, might take transit, but also just kind of keeping that idea out there for all roadway users, even if they might not use transit in the future. So based on these, the transit propensity and traffic analyses, we found these three locations that we found as logical termini areas for an extended pulse. This would not necessarily be the final endpoint. There might be a further expansion down the line, but right now we found Glenside Drive, Worcester Road, and Parham Road as areas that we see as logical endpoints for this next phase of an expansion. And turnaround routing was analyzed for all of these potential locations, so we do know that if it was expanded to one of these areas, the bus could turn around.
That's good.
So this is kind of what the analysis culminated into. These are the four main recommendations that are outlined in the final report, and they are to extend the current Pulse BRT to Parham Road, so that furthest logical termini location. This would certainly overcome that I-64 barrier that exists around Reynolds Crossing right now. Exploring an extension to Short Pump as a future phase. This is something that we heard a lot in the public survey. A lot of people shop in Short Pump, work in Short Pump, just want to get to Short Pump in other ways rather than driving, or just wanting to have the option to get there in another way. So that is definitely something that should be explored as a future phase. Also re-examining the alignments of current routes 18 and 19 to better complement an extended pulse. Right now they kind of touch or almost touch West Broad Street in this area, but don't quite make it. Especially if there was an extension to Parham Road, we would want to have some connectivity there. And finally, to further assess opportunities for park and ride, which is also something that we heard a lot about in the public survey. People are curious and interested in using transit, but they might be coming from neighborhoods that are not connected to transit, so they would like to have a place to park their car and get into the city or get into other areas along the corridor.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
just before you leave this slide, I'm looking at the final report at the end of the executive summary, and I just want to, because I'll have a question about it later, but your number 4, further assess opportunities for park and ride. The longer version, I understand you have to read it for the slide, the longer version in your report online is further assess existing land use to utilize private agreements for park and ride to serve the pulse in the short term. Just wanted to pocket that for maybe discussion.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Obviously, it does get into a lot more detail here, so there is a lot more work than to just kind of look at areas for park and ride. But this gets in that a little bit more. As part of this analysis, we looked at parking lots and did a very quick parking lot analysis. So parking lots make up just over 17% of this area, the corridor, including that half-mile buffer. So the whole study area that we looked at is 11.28 square miles, and parking lots cover 1.93 square miles of that area. so 17% of the corridor. Obviously, some of these parking lots are well utilized, Willow Lawn particularly. A lot more are severely underutilized and could support more productive land use in the short term and into the long term. And these also present an opportunity for park and ride. In their current state, they could be just kind of temporary park and ride lots, and then as these areas become more developed, there could be opportunities for kind of parking, sharing agreements, and building parking garages for park and ride opportunities. So the gray areas are the current parking lots here, and you can see these in this map and all the other maps on westbroadbrt.com. And finally, I'm just going to go quickly into this economic impact analysis. This was one of the most detailed parts of the analysis itself, but I'll just kind of summarize it in these 3 points here. We found that job growth along the Pulse corridor shifted primarily towards higher skilled and higher wage jobs. So real estate, rental and leasing, finance and insurance, but also supported sectors like accommodation and food services. Commercial land use and property values increased significantly along this corridor, particularly in relation to other areas that we looked at and the region as a whole. This corridor performed quite well, and implementation of BRT can lead to an increased building and rehab activities, particularly due to increased economic activity, population density, and accessibility. And I want to clarify, I may have kind of skipped this point, but this was looking at the current Pulse corridor as it exists right now from Rockets Landing to Willow Lawn. So just looking at that area for economic impact. And it doesn't quite fully get into the full economic impact because Pulse opened in 2018. Obviously, the pandemic impacted the economic activity there and the development of the corridor. So there's we didn't quite capture all of the economic potential. So the next steps, you can, like I mentioned, look at the final report on the website, westbroadbrt.com. We will be presenting this to GRTC Board of Directors in their August meeting, and we did present this to the TAC in June, and they recommended it for adoption. You can stay connected at the website for email updates and just look at the final report and other resources. And I will be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments, but if not, the action requested today is that the policy board adopt the West Broad Street BRT corridor analysis as presented.
Questions, comments, motion? Yes. Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of questions. I'll need to gather just a little bit of information. Thank you. How long was your survey? What were the I don't need necessarily the dates, but it's time period?
Oh, it was November 15th to December 16th.
I thought I saw that. Okay, how did you publish a survey opportunity?
Oh, we had a lot of partners in the media, so RTD, BizSense, a lot of local papers.
Where did your responses come from? How did you receive your survey responses? Was it online? You pulled up a dashboard?
Oh, yeah, primarily online. We did go out one day to do in-person surveys and talk to people at bus stops.
You know how many in-person respondents that you had roughly out of the?
Oh, just in-person, probably 24 or so. Most people did go online.
Did you abbreviate your survey in person, particularly for those who are waiting at a bus, or did some of your team get on the bus and somebody
maybe in the middle of a survey, but then their bus comes or something of that nature?
We did not get on the bus. We stayed at just about 4 stops around Willow
Sure.
Lawn. But so we encourage people to finish the survey if they had time, or if not, we directed them to the website.
One last question for I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. Please. Thank you. The folks that responded to using private transportation was pretty high. So I think your survey captured something very interesting and shows that you did have a good survey. How did you get the private transportation folks? Those came in online as well, and they designated, that they were using private transportation, but would use public or some other multimodal form if that opportunity was available. Is that correct?
Correct, and like there were likely also some transit riders that also used private vehicles.
Right, crosser, sure. Mr. Chairman, I do want to bring up, I think maybe to incorporate some of my thoughts with Mr. Thornton's thoughts and Mr. Lumpkin. So you had mentioned, I think there were 85 or 89 folks that said that there was an impediment to employment in the region. I just make note, and with all due respect to your survey, I think it was a great survey. That's 89 folks in the region who responded to the survey. I think we can recognize that there's more than 89 folks in this region that there's an impediment to employment. And employers have really asked us to look at this throughout the region and many of our localities, opportunity to get their employees or potential employees to their places of employment. As it relates to ADA, I would just make a comment there. I think it's important that it be prioritized, that where there's current off-site ADA infrastructure, say at a Willow Lawn or at a Short Pump or something like that, we have some of that off-site ADA, that we look at those that are closer to that and connect the off-site ADA to potential on-site ADA. Certainly you'd want to have ADA in a perfect world all the way up and down that route. But there are going to be some places where I think the money would be better spent where there's off-site ADA infrastructure and it's just not connected to the infrastructure at the particular stop, to focus on that first. I think there'd be more return on investment. But and how many people were on your team for your survey? You were team lead.
We had 3 people from Plan RVA and then 2 individuals from GRTC.
Yeah, great, well done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's good comments. Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I want to make
Please.
just want to thank Plan RVA for all the work that they did. It was definitely a quality product that was produced. Really appreciate the partnership to get us through this phase 1 of the Henrico extension. Thank you, Dan.
Please, Ms. Love.
I'll be a little late because a lot has happened, and I support, a robust and effective transit system is critical. The last year has being chair of this organization to really realize, and I've said several times, I'm excited about the regional cooperation, specifically to Goochland, of course. Our Goochland interest is, the folks at the end of that route, the Sheltering Arms and others, they have been, since 2 or 3 years ago, they've asked, they're interested in getting some extension out to their location, across that, out Henrico and into Goochland. But stepping back a little bit, sort of looking at this, and again, not being, having focused on this over the years, when the Pulse came along, I thought the logic of it was to rapidly get folks from, Willow Lawn to downtown. So what issue are we trying to solve because there's already service along Broad Street, right, from Willow Lawn out to Perham and beyond. So by bringing rapid transit, are we trying to just make it more attractive to more people to get rapidly from these points? Is that fair to say that that's a reason to do this?
Yes.
Some of those things. As far as, I don't know if you had the map in there where it kind of shows the density based on which basically there was pockets up to Perham that would support kind of the BRT style service. A big thing about BRT is also just the growth that's happening in terms of economic development along the Broad Street corridor. Also kind of supports a BRT style, and then the more, as you look at the Broad Street in the downtown area from Willow Lawn all the way down, what has happened with knowing that it's a permanent station that has been set there with the investment from the region, then you can plan along with transit in that sort of idea.
So the BRT style, what is that?
It is infrastructure that's built right into the right of way. As far as the technology, it's way more enhanced than a typical station where today we don't really have real time. The totems show when things actually are coming as far as the bus arriving, and we don't have fares right now, but ticket vending machines are there, which is very different than, and it's off.
So more of an integration into the network.
Yeah, it's kind of the step before like a light rail, but a bus version, knowing as far as investment.
Okay, so an element of it is to get, I guess, increased capacity, but also the speed of getting folks across.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects going with the dedicated lanes that will be expanded even further out, which the BRT will optimize.
So back to that final recommendations, the recommendation is extend the current Pulse BRT to Parham Road. And then, I don't know if these are in order of priority, but we go, the fourth one is further assess existing land use to utilize private agreements for park and ride to serve the Pulse in the short term. When I think, because I work near an office near Willow Lawn, and I drive this, and we talk about safety on Broad Street is people, at nighttime, maybe not walking in the middle of the street. Sometimes that can be frightening, but we think about going to Parham Road, and I think about what's at Parham Road and Broad. Is part of this model for people to park and ride? Because where would you do that in Parham Road? And so then I started thinking, well, maybe you're talking along the way, and I think you said Wistar and Glenside, maybe along the way, but to have, number one, extend it to Parham Road, and then number four, further assess, like we're thinking about. That's almost the cart before the horse, because if part of the model is park and ride, or maybe it's just people walking, maybe the plan is there's enough population, because you did the little half mile, maybe it's enough that'll walk out to Broad Street and catch it along the way. I don't know, but does the data suggest, is an important part of this park and ride element at the Parham Road?
That is something that we did hear a lot from the public. It's also something that Henrico County I understand is interested in as well. So it's kind of the all-included approach, I guess.
Because Willow Lawn makes sense. You have a lot of, have that parking area. Now I know it's a challenge sharing that parking area, but go ahead.
Yeah, may I elaborate?
Please.
So they're kind of in parallel. One encompasses the other, but they're also a different effort going on. So when Willow Lawn was put in place, the intent was to put a park and ride there. We had several conversations with Anthem and other businesses, and just the desire from the business owners did not work out as far as a park and ride at that point in time. We did a parking study 2021 maybe, where we looked at just what would work as far as parcel size within that area for what would work today. Again, it came up to nothing that would kind of support transit at this point in time. We are looking at what could be maybe leased options of what's currently in the corridor, because there is still a need from what we have. So that's conversations that we have, I would say almost like still monthly with Henrico County, trying to figure out how can we make this work until we get an extension. Now with the extension will encompass, we are looking at a parcel that would support kind of a turnaround for the Pulse as well as a park and ride facility. So all kind of working together. And we still see kind of a need for one at Willow Lawn, even if it was to go to Parham, because there's just different pockets of those interstates coming in.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mr.
Don't park at Buzz and Ed's, but if you do, buy a sandwich first, okay, for right now. Any
Thank
other
you for fielding
comments,
those
questions? Ever is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the policy board adopt the West Broad Street BRT corridor analysis as presented.
Here's a motion. Second. And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item B3 is related to an amendment request for the FY24 planning work program. That will be on page 122 of the agenda packet for the staff report. There are basically two components to this amendment request. The first is some additional detail, which will be found on page 27 of 38 of the work program that is in the packet. And this is a request to add more detail to allow for direct support of GRTC in the amount of $100,000 in carryover 5303 transit funding. 5303 is one of the categories of fundings from the Federal Transit Administration that we use. We had excess funding in the fiscal year that just ended, and we are trying to make sure that we have the work program in a place where it reflects the ability of us to pass through this funding to GRTC for use in developing their essential infrastructure plan. We are excited about this project, and staff is preparing to do some companion work regarding bus stops and the impact of bus stop improvements on ridership in the region. So along with GRTC completing their plan, we are looking forward to doing a before-after analysis of what the ridership is at a selected bus stop. When you make the improvements, what is the impact of those improvements to the attractiveness of the stop and the usefulness of the corridor for the transit riders in the region. So that is the first step, and it's basically adding additional language to explain what the use of these funds will be going towards. When the work program was adopted originally, it didn't have the necessary level of detail. The second component of the work program amendment is related to adding additional language to the work program that will allow for, in some cases, an administrative modification of the work program to take place. There are two bullets on page 122 that kind of explain what those modifications might be. It would allow a transfer of PL funding. So PL is the second, the federal highway component of funding that the MPO operates under. And this would allow for transfer of that types of funding between subtasks of a broader UPWP category. And as an example, 7300 is our long-range transportation planning category. There are 6 subtasks under that overall component that, for example, we could transfer funds if this administrative modification is allowable. Staff will be able to make the transfer of funds from long-range transportation plan to scenario planning. Both of those are subtasks of that overall category, and the purpose here would be to allow for a little bit more flexibility, especially towards the end of the fiscal year, where funds in certain work tasks are tighter, and based on the priorities that the TPO has followed through the year, we may need to transition to cover any possible shortfalls. In the event that there are bigger needs that perhaps like a 7300, a long-range transportation planning fund may be needed to transfer to short-range transportation plan or administrative funding, that would still need to come through the policy board for approval. But this would hopefully, this action allowing the addition of this language would allow for the kind of the smaller cases where it's more administrative to make sure we have the funding from month to month to cover particular subtasks would be allowable, and we wouldn't have to work through the TAC approval process, the policy board approval process, the essentially 3 months of work to get these changes made.
So if you look on page 139, just to give you everyone an example of that, because I thought it was really a good example in our executive session earlier. You can see long-range transportation planning as an example, 7,300 funds. So what this action would do would be to allow administratively the transfer of, let's say, 7310 funds under long-range transportation plan to, as Mr. Parsons suggested, scenario planning, which is 7315, without having to come back before this body. So it really is supposed to be a time saving measure, but would not alter the goals or the otherwise the tasks that are before staff as employed by this body.
Mr. Chairman.
Please, Mr. Williams.
We had a very good discussion in executive session, and I want to thank Chet for coming forward with the additional information to the policy board and also the comments of the chairman. And with that, I make the motion to approve.
And I'll second that and note that it facilitates accounting primarily in terms of allocation, save time. I mean, let's be efficient. I applaud that effort. Thank you very much. So
Any
I'll
other
second that,
discussion?
yeah.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item B4 is related to one of those work program amendments. This is an agreement starting on page 162 of the agenda packet. This is an agreement between the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization and GRTC to allow for the mechanism to pass through that funding that we've identified so that GRTC can complete its essential infrastructure plan. So the staff report on 162 has background of what the essential infrastructure plan is, with the staff recommendation that the TPO approves the agreement for utilization of pass-through FTA and Commonwealth Transit funds in the fiscal year 2024 work program. And if the policy board is agreeable to this, we will work through getting it executed with Ms. Adams from GRTC.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Please, Ms. Newman.
This would like to motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Yeah, great.
Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Items 5 and 6, Mr. Bushing is going to present related to 2 TIP amendments before the body today.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So these 2 items are new projects being proposed to be added to the TIP, which is why they're coming separately from the consent agenda TIP items you saw earlier. The first one is the Main Street Station improvements. So this is a project that was submitted by the city of Richmond. This project has received a congressional earmark. So this is community project funding that is dedicated to this project. And just like any other project being added to the TIP, we have to go through fiscal constraint, find an exemption, or do an updated air quality conformity assessment, public review, TAC review, and the TPO has to approve it. So this project is, as I mentioned, related to Main Street Station. This would add some improvements to the west platform, ADA ramps, detectable surfaces. There'd be a steel awning for people going below. So this is some of the improvements for safety to make it so that west platform can be used eventually for the Richmond to Raleigh or just general service to that side of the station. It also includes some upgrades to the building and office space in the Main Street Station, including real-time passenger display information. So this is an overview of the project information. It's Main Street Station improvements. It would be exempt under reconstruction or renovation of transit buildings or structures. As far as our long-range plan is concerned, it is a local or programmatic improvement, so it doesn't need to be specifically listed as a project. The total cost is $875,000, and $700,000 of that would be the earmark funds, and the balance would be the local match. TAC reviewed this at their last meeting, unanimously recommended approval. We held a 15-day public review period where the materials were posted on our website. We received no comments related to this particular project. And so the action that is requested today is that the TPO amends the FY 21 to 24 TIP to add the project, COR 001 Main Street Station improvements, and then further resolved that this project is exempt from the conformity requirements. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Any questions? Please, Ms. Deville.
No question, just a motion.
All right, I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So this next item is the North-South Bus Rapid Transit Line. This is a similar project. It has been awarded congressional earmark funding, and it's also in the city of Richmond. We have to go through all these same steps. So this is a big project, obviously. The original request for the earmark funding was related to a $33 million project. It's a much bigger project, transit lines, that includes part of the fall line. It's a bigger scope. Most of that went into smart scale. And so there's a smart scale project for $28.2 million that was just awarded funding, which will cover a lot of that scope. The balance is still covered via this earmark. And after discussing with state partners, the decision was to keep the 2 projects separate since they have separate funding sources, and they'll just be in the TIP with a note that the 2 are linked. So this project is really focused on the ITS and communications elements. So it's really the transit signal priority, so the buses can jump faster ahead of traffic, signal operations, and then all the signage that we were talking about a few minutes ago with when's the bus gonna get there, purchasing tickets off board, that sort of, those components. So that's all relying on that same fiber backbone. And then this is, again, connected to the Richmond signal system and the emergency vehicle preemption. So it's all one interconnected network. So just an example is that information signs, the off-board ticketing, the totem displays, these are all the different components that would be linked through that system. And this is obviously an example from the current pulse line. So this project is $3.75 million in total. So $3 million of that is the earmarked funding. $750,000 would be the local match. It is exempt for construction or renovation of power, signal, and communications systems. So that's mass transit exemption. And it does relate to the long-range transportation plan for our north-south BRT corridor, as well as the 60 corridor that have been identified. And that one was in the vision plan, which is still consistent with this funding since it's discretionary. On a related note with the north-south BRT, so GRTC is actually in the middle of a study right now for north-south BRT and identifying that preferred corridor. So the funding is a little ahead of the identification of the preferred corridor, kind of to Mr. Lumpkin's point on the previous item. But the name in here reflects what was in the earmark. So the earmark and the award letter from FTA was Richmond's first north-south bus rapid transit line. So the naming matches with that. This is really driving more toward the Manchester Bridge crossing, but it is a little bit ahead of the study. So that's something we wanted to raise and make sure the board was aware of before we moved and had action on this. TAC reviewed this item at the June meeting and recommended approval. And then same thing, we had a 15-day public review where it was posted on the website and we didn't receive any comments on this project. So the action requested would be to add the project COR002 North-South Bus Rapid Transit Line project to the TIP, and then to note that it's exempt, and we included two exemptions. One's under safety for traffic control devices, and the other's under mass transit for the signal and communication systems, as mentioned. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions or a motion? Ms. Newbill, thank you.
Would like a motion to.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Parsons, agency and committee reports.
Yes, sir, thank you. I will take item 1A. The CBTA report is on page 177. I'm not going to read through the list, but I did want to highlight that we are now in a phase at the CBTA where there are agreements in place for actual projects that are going to be both locality administered and VDOT administered. We are moving, this is the next phase of the CBTA where projects are going to be built using CBTA funds, and we are establishing the framework for reimbursement for those funds through the CBTA, and it's actually a really exciting number crunching kind of exercise that we're embarking on. And I think we've done a great job with the board, the authority, and the both advisory committees to establish a framework that really is careful and deliberate, but is advancing the funds as quickly as possible.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Parsons. GRTC, further?
Sure, they touched on a lot of stuff that we're already working on. But I'll go ahead and highlight again, the micro transit, we are making progress in that, even though you guys haven't heard much in a while, but we have just approved the communication plan. So jurisdictions look for a meeting to come back at, so we can kind of curate it to be specific to the jurisdictions that are doing the pilot zones. Secondly, we are also working on kind of getting a operating party, so that will be in-house and will be a third party, so we'll communicate that also with the jurisdictions once that is set up. The North-South BRT study, that is supposed to be completed in August, so look for invites for stakeholder as well as technical invites coming up in July and August for that. And last, our transit strategic plan is also underway, and we have surveys out to kind of tell us the outlook for the next 10 years in transit related to that.
Thank you for that. Ms. Dean, RMTA.
Good morning.
It's still morning.
Yes, and so at the last meeting, I indicated that our board voted in May to do a toll increase, which will take effect in September, September 1st. We have been engaging in a social media campaign to let our customers know that this is coming. We also have some signage that we have put on our toll booths. And we will continue some additional advertisement with RTD and the Enrico Citizen, as well as the Chesterfield Observer, so that our customers can know this is coming September 1st. As I indicated previously, this is the first increase that we've had since 2008.
Just one note, the Observer folded, so yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the Observer is gone, so it may be better to communicate it via Chesterfield Media and Communications.
Okay.
Because we're working on ways to
That
enhance
happened 'cause we
communication.
just
In the
talked with
absence
them.
of, this year, January 1st, they ceased to exist.
Really?
The Observer, so we no longer have a paper in this regard. And that's why I think we have to do better as a county communicating data. And I might also add, one thing, I'm very interested in communicating voter data, voting precincts, and the information on, for example, ballots and sample ballots to intended citizens with respect to the given areas that we have voted. So that's another thing I just want to throw out in conjunction with your comments. But so to Chesterfield will be a better segue, media and communication specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Williams.
I may piggyback on my colleague's comments. We are suffering from the same problem in Powhatan County. The paper hasn't gone out of being, it's just not getting out like it used to get out. You have to go to a designated locality to pick up a paper, or you have to subscribe. So we have a challenge in informing the public as to what's going on in Powhatan County, just like Chesterfield.
Thank you.
Just specifically, we won't be doing digital ads.
Thank you. That'll be helpful. Thank you, Mr.
Just
Carroll.
want to clarify that.
Mr. Chair, please, I mean, I don't like to assume things, but has any of the local media outlets, 6, 8, or 12, run stories on this, do we know of?
Oh, they most certainly did.
Okay.
I think they probably ran stories for about a week after a board meeting.
Okay.
Mhm. And I'm sure that leading up to September 1st, they will again.
All right. DRPT, Mr. Vinsky. Oh, no, dear, I'm sorry, my bad. I'm just going down my list, folks. Mr. Todd Dale, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Good morning, everybody. Just a couple of items to make everybody fully aware. Hopefully you are aware that the C2B adopted the 6-year plan at their last month's meeting. Been a long morning. That was reflective of the consensus scenario approved in May at their May meeting. Everybody should be fully aware of the projects included in that. If not, certainly let me know and we can get you that information. One item to note that the June meeting was the last meeting for our current former CTB member, Mr. Brown. That I do not have an update or a notification on who our forthcoming CTB member is at this point in time. I've heard no update on that front, so please stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll know shortly. A couple of updates related to Fall Line Trail. As you should be aware, Design Build Package 1 was advertised December 22, awarded in April of this year, and we expect to see active construction to begin in the fall of this year. Design Build number 2, which is the southern end, survey and procurement package is under development. I will say that we are experiencing some challenges associated with the alignment on that end, largely dealing with cultural resource issues, but staff is working their way through that. Of course, Design Build number 3, which is north of Design Build number 2, will follow along once we move forward with Design Build number 2. Last item is just to give you guys an update on the I-64 gap widening project. Segment A, which is from mile marker 204.9 to mile marker 215 in New Kent County. We are marching rapidly towards design build contract award in hopefully the September-October neighborhood of this year. The expected completion date for the construction is late spring 2027. Should note that segment C, outside of this district and outside of this group's purview, mile marker 224 to 233 in James City County will follow as the next segment. That is slated to go out to procurement in fall of this year. The middle segment between 215 and 224 will go out for procurement in the summer of 2024. Glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions? Mr. Rucker, you're not on the list, but I'm gonna call on you. Do you have an update?
Like on the spot.
Well, I certainly hope everyone in the region is taking advantage of notice of funding opportunities. I think when I left this morning, there was a new announcement with respect to funding for our rural discretionary program as well as a community-based one. I don't know, Chet, whether or not you've seen that. If not, we typically advertise, promote those through VDOT, and VDOT pretty much disseminates those. I think what we're discussing internally is perhaps sending those not only to VDOT but also to VAMPO as well as VAPDC. Yeah, I encourage everyone to stay tuned and pay special attention to those notice of funding opportunities. There's a lot of money, a lot of opportunities out there, especially for community-based grants. I'll work with Chad on that.
Mr. Rucker, we all of us extend our condolences for your loss.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, future meeting topics.
Page 178, we've been working to try and keep track of possible future meeting topics. We are going to be moving into busy season at the end of this summer, early fall with RRTPO CMAQ applications and specialized transit. As you can see, I'm not going to read through the list, but we have agenda items in spades, and we're looking forward to continuing to work on these things and get them before the policy board.
Thank you. All right, any other member comments? All right, our next meeting is September 7th, 2023 at 9:30, right here. Be there, be square, or via Zoom. For the good of the order, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.